Okay, so this question type is the classic fill in the blanks question that we used to solve in the school. But obviously, you're going to get a bit harder question in Duolingo exam than the difficulty that we face in the school. So there are some words. Each of this blank is one letter, and you need to fill up these letters, and together this total word should make should be in the should be a real English word. And through this question, what the question test is trying to test is your knowledge of vocabulary. One thing to remember, very important thing to remember, is that you will never get a word which is very difficult. All of these words are usually simple words which you already know 80 or 90% of the time, and it's just that in the exam you might not know what is this word because there's only a couple of letters which are given. But most of the time the words are very simple and you already know the word. So in this question, for instance, Minneapolis, the passage talks about Minneapolis, Minnesota. These are cities and states which you don't need to know. You don't need to have any prior knowledge of the topic which were presented in the exam. So you will never get fill in the blanks question where you need to talk about this specific cities. Now, the other things which are tested are the sentence formation and grammatical structures. For instance, it might help you if you know that for every sentence to be okay, it needs to have at least one subject and one verb. It will help you to know that those grammatical rules. But it's completely okay to not know them because you can't solve the question by without having the required grammatical knowledges. So when you get this question, what do you do in the exam? We strategies to solve the question. So once you get the question, immediately start solving whichever words you can, and then we try to understand the context of what is the passage talking about. Every passage will have at least one message. At least one message will be conveyed through the passage, and your goal should be to identify what is the message being communicated. Okay, so let's start solving the question. Minneapolis is a city in Minnesota. It is next to St. Paul, Minnesota. St. Paul. So St. Paul is another city. Minneapolis is another city which is very near to Minneapolis. So they're talking about two cities. Try to always put things into context to understand what is the passage talking about. Okay, now the second sentence. St. Paul and Minneapolis are called the Twin Cities because yeah, it perfectly fits, so it must be because this city 1 and city 2 are called the Twin Cities because they are right next to each other. So since they're very close to each other, they are called Twin Cities. Minneapolis and St. Paul. You don't need to know the name again, but city 1, this is city talking about two cities, which is in the state of Minnesota. Now, then the passage keeps on talking about Minneapolis. It's the first city that the passage introduced. Minneapolis is the biggest is the correct word, biggest city in Minnesota. Probably you don't know what is this word, so we will just keep it aside. But solve the rest of the part which you can. Probably you were confused with this too. They've Here it is. Here, enjoy the lakes, parks, and I don't know this word. So you're done with first round. Now try to put things into context in the passage. You have ample amount of time to solve the fill in the blanks question, so that shouldn't be any issue. So they're talking about this. Let's put it visually. So they're talking about two cities. This is city one is Minneapolis, and city two is St. Paul. Let's identify them as M and S. Now, these two cities are very close to each other, and they are called twin cities because they are close to each other. That's what is mentioned in the passage. Now, Minneapolis is the biggest city in Minnesota. So the passage then talks about Minneapolis in specific, and it says that it has a lot. It's a very big city, and there are a lot of people living there, which is like 370,000 people. So people, this city with it should be the correct preposition to use here. So there we go. Minneapolis is the biggest city in Minnesota with about 370,000 people. The city has 370,000 people. It's a very big city and it has a lot of people living in it. Then the next sentence is people dash live here. People who live here, that's a very easy grammatical word which you need to use. People who live here enjoy the lakes, parks, and what? So basically, it's saying that this Minneapolis city is very big. A lot of people live here, and people love to live in this city because they have a lot of natural scenarios like the lakes, the parks, and something which is which relieves stress. People love that place. Something related to natural scenario. So you had a hint. That's strategy 3. Take hint from the context. So it's talking about 3 different natural beauties of the city, why people love the city. Okay, so if you still don't know what would be this 5-letter word which starts with RI, go read the second part of the later part of the sentence, which says the Minneapolis River runs through the city. Even though you didn't have a fill in the blanks in that sentence, it helps you to understand, well, this word starts with RI. So most probably it's talking about river. So you literally had your answer in the second sentence there. So people who live in this Minneapolis city enjoy the lakes, parks, and river, which is there. Okay, so the Minneapolis River runs through the city. So then it talks about this specific river that runs through this city. There we go. You have your answer solved. Now, how do you prepare for this question type? So every time you start reading different things and which should become a reading habit by now. So you should read about 30 minutes every day. And once you read a sentence, try to describe the paragraph that you read in 1 or 2 sentences using your own language. This is the same when you're solving the question. It will help you for instance, if you're solving this question here, it would be really helpful if you could describe the passage using your own sentence. Okay, so let's do that. So this passage talks about 2 cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, and these 2 cities are called twin cities because they're very close to each other. Then the passage talks about Minneapolis, this specific city, which is very big. A lot of people live here, and the people love to live in this city because they have a lot of natural scenarios like the lakes, parks, and the rivers. And that's about it. That's the message. In the passage, that's what they're saying. And if you get into the habit of describing a passage using your own language, it will help you understand the passage better. So when you're doing this reading practice, always try to describe, after reading one paragraph, try to use your own words to describe the paragraph to test your understanding. What did you understand from the passage that you just read? Okay, so, and also, most of the time the fill in the blanks that you're going to get are going to be prepositions. A lot of prepositions you are going to see in the question, so it's very helpful to practice that, knowing what kinds of prepositions to use, and um, it will help you to solve the question. So in this question, for instance, we had a lot of prepositions. It is, next to, simple. These are all prepositions which you can practice beforehand, and see the number of prepositions that you saw in the question that you just solved. It's a lot. So it will be very helpful if you practice the various prepositions and when to use which preposition. If you get a practice for that, it will be very helpful for you to solve this question.